I am Teri Franzen, and I'm actually a software engineer by day, wildlife photographer, and naturalist by night. And this is the year, or into next year, that I'm actually going to complete my master naturalist training to become a true master naturalist. It's time. But we're going to talk about monarchs, and I'm just going to go right here. Life cycle and anatomy, conservation threats, and my cat's going to join me. How to support the monarchs, and one specific monarch conservationist, Robyn Ellman, which presents also a volunteer opportunity. Unfortunately, she's done for this year because the monarchs are migrating south, but this will be an opportunity next year. Hopefully we can get the word out earlier next year. I just reached out to Christy late in the season this year. But so as I said, I'm a software engineer and a wildlife photographer and a naturalist. I'm not a biologist. I've done my best to explain what's happening through my photographs and video. But I try not to go too deep into the biology of it because I'm not a specialist. So let's start with life cycle. Oh, geez. I can't lock the door at the moment, so my cat's gonna help me. So the metamorphosis of a butterfly is composed of 4 stages: egg, larva or caterpillar, pupa or chrysalis, and adult, the butterfly, which is, I mean, it's just remarkable, the transformation that insects undergo in their life cycle. But we're going to start with the egg. The butterfly seeks out the caterpillar's only host plant of, hang on, I'm sorry. She hears me talking and she has to be here. Okay. The butterfly seeks out the caterpillar's only host plant of milkweed. It has a namesake milky substance called cardenolide, I guess is how you pronounce it, which is poisonous to many animals. And you can see it on the stem here of this broken branch, milkweed. Many vertebrates, including humans, will vomit and experience heart arrhythmia with potentially deadly results from cardenolides. Monarchs are completely unharmed by this toxin, so it builds up in the monarch system and works as a defense for the butterfly. The butterfly seeks out young, fresh leaves and not the kind of old leathery ones, typically laying them on the underside of a leaf. So here's kind of a bad, but it's a cell phone video. It's very, very quick. They just fly in, deposit their egg, and then leave. And then this one, as it expands, you can see even on the tiniest leaves, they just really like the fresh leaves. She secretes a sticky glue-like substance while attaching the egg. And through her life cycle of a 2-week period, a female will lay hundreds of eggs. I think the record in captivity is over 1,100, but that's kind of a controlled atmosphere. The egg is is teeny tiny. It's approximately the size of a pinhead, 1 millimeter in height and width, basically. And it's fully formed prior to fertilization and already in the female's abdomen. It has a funnel-like opening which allows the sperm to enter, and about 3 to 5 days to hatching. Prior to hatching, the caterpillar will be fully formed. And at this time, the face cap and setae, I guess is how it's pronounced, the sensory hairs will become visible. So this is, you know, it's going to hatch within hours when you see it like this. So, and it takes hours because on this night, and it went into evening, I wanted to photograph the egg hatching. And I didn't realize it was going to take as long as it did. So I had to get lights from the house and bring them outside because I was doing this fully outside. But you can see the caterpillar moving around And it does that for a long time. But I thought it's really cool to see it moving around in there. And then eventually it starts eating its way out of the shell. So the first meal of a new caterpillar is going to be the shell. And it takes a lot of breaks too. It just kept stopping for a long period of time while it was hatching. This was my first time using this macro lens, so I'd like to get some better footage. You can already see the little tentacles appearing, these little brown nubs. But finally it comes out. And before I go into any more, I want to go through the anatomy. And you're going to see this in all stages. It has these three sections: the abdomen, the thorax, and the head. The caterpillar only has 6 legs that it uses to propel its movement. These other legs are actually pearl legs, and their purpose is to help hold on to plants or whatever they're crawling around on. So they have tiny hooks that help them grasp. And then you can see the spiracles, and these are basically the breathing tubes, how they receive oxygen. And just to look closer at the face, you can see these are the antennae then. And the mandibles, they have very strong mandibles. And 6 pairs of ocelli, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, or simple eyes. And then again, tentacles. So I wanted to show you the newly hatched caterpillar because it has just these little nubs, both on front and rear. And then this is a later generation, maybe third, the front tentacles in the rear, or fourth, forget. The tentacles are not true antennae. They provide sensory input in aiding in the movement to supplement their poor eyesight. So there are 5 instars. The whole period of until pupation is about 9 to 14 days. Development is very weather related. It can happen extremely quickly on the hot summer days, hot and long summer days. The 5 stages, the instars, are marked with shedding of skin between transitions. Rapid growth occurs. Primary functions include eating. That's all they do, is eat, grow, develop, and poop a lot. And when they get bigger, they have bigger poops, much bigger, and it gets messy. So this is just a little detail about the instars. Now, it's very difficult to tell the difference between instars. And unfortunately, when I was photographing this series, I was focused on another aspect of monarch conservation and wasn't thinking about getting the instars. So I combed through my photos and did the best I could to match up the instars. But basically, you can tell through the tentacle length, somewhat the size of the caterpillar, although it can vary. But the tentacle size is probably the best indicator. And they grow 3 times their size just as a first instar. In the second instar, you can see their tentacle nubs. And the tentacles just keep getting longer in proportion to its face. So during the final generation, then the tentacles are more, it's starting to use its tentacles to kind of feel around, it seems to be. And it's about 24 times the size that it was as a first instar. So here is a newly emerged, and don't let the tentacles fool you here because they're actually folded up. So he's just shed his skin. And this is actually 5th generation, 5th instar, sorry. And now he's unfurling his tentacles. And his first order of business is to check out the skin and start munching. They don't all do that, but a lot of them do. And you can see how he's using his legs to hold on to the skin, I guess. In this case, another caterpillar wanted to join in on the fun. So here's just an illustration of the different size differences between first and second instar. And one of the things I didn't touch on earlier is the first instar's first meal, again, is the egg, and it typically comes out of the egg and then it goes back and finishes the rest of the shell. Then it goes on and starts eating milkweed. So here's another group of, I think this is fifth instar, and you can see the size differences. Probably fourth. It's just really difficult for me to tell the instars. If there are any experts in the group, I'd love your opinions. And again, this is that fifth instar guy using his tentacles as he moves around. And this is just to show you the chewing difference between first instar and fifth instar. So this guy's chewing through the leaf. He's chewing holes, basically. The threads are a little more difficult, so he's not eating the veins. And then the later instars, they're eating on the edges here. So you can see they just, and then the next picture is going to show you a little bit better. Oops. So you can see this guy, he's basically starting at the top and then cutting out a curve right here, and he's just going to continue chowing down in that manner. And they'll eat every last bit of the leaf and start on the, well, basically the stem, but. When it's ready to pupate, the caterpillar is going to stop eating. It's eaten all it's going to eat for its life. And then it starts to seek a place where it can hang. So in this case, these both are being raised in a net box, and they're climbing to the top. And I just thought this one on the right was kind of cool because you could see it through the plastic. It's going to spin a silk mat with a spinneret at the top, from the spinneret at the top of its head, and then attach and make a J. I'm sorry, it's going to attach its pro legs to the silk that it spins and form a J shape. And it's going to remain in this position until the next day then. While it's hanging in a J shape, the caterpillar is already beginning a complete transformation. It's going to shed its outer coating, and the outer shell or the chrysalis is forming. And then once formed, it attaches its cremaster to the silk, and I'll show you that in a minute. The body releases enzymes called caspases, which dissolve cells in the monarch's muscles and organisms, leaving only life-supporting cells intact. A group of imaginal discs that were formed even before it hatched in the egg are finally put to work to create body parts like wings, antennae, legs. And this is just a quick time lapse of it shedding its outer layer. And at the end there, it was shaking around a lot. And so this next image, this is the cremaster right here that it's using to attach to the silk. It's got dozens of tiny little hooks at the tip. And so it's moving around trying to attach all the little hooks to the silk. So here's a little bit of anatomy of the monarch chrysalis. Oh, and that's a really good question. And we're just getting to that. Somebody asked about determining in the larval stage. No, you can't determine gender. So we're just getting to gender. Spiracles. Oops. Oh, we showed, no, we showed the spiracles earlier, so I didn't put a little bullet, but those are, again, where it gets its oxygen. The cremaster is that stem with the tiny hooks on top that holds to the silk mat. And you can see the wings very clearly. And the proboscis, which is going to be its feeding tube, which is currently in 2 parts. The antennae. And this is the first stage where you can identify gender. So this is a female on the top, and this is a male. And it's very difficult to see on some chrysalis, and you almost have to wait, especially if they're hanging in a tough spot where you can't see it. But there's a teeny tiny line, vertical line. It looks like an upside down T on the female. And then the male looks like he's smiling. So and this is tiny. It's a little bit harder to see on the males. So at this stage, that's how you can detect gender. When the monarch is ready to eclose or emerge, the final coloring in the butterfly becomes apparent. There's been a lot of different reports on what's happening here, but it sounds like it's because a lot of people are saying that the outer shell becomes translucent, but I've recently learned that it's because the pigmentation doesn't show up until the very end. So the monarch, it's not translucent, it's just, it doesn't turn translucent, doesn't change. So you'll begin to see gaps between the outer casing and the butterfly, and that's what this white is. So it's starting to prepare to emerge. And it'll, let's see. So this is just a really quick time lapse of it emerging with its big abdomen. And then here's some closer up photos. So it's starting to break free, and then it's pushing forward, and then it's releasing the abdomen. And then it's going to turn around and hang, and it's going to begin pumping hemolymph from its abdomen into its wings. So that's why it's so full at this point, I guess. And it's going to stitch its proboscis around the same time. So it uses saliva, and I understand that saliva is not actually a sticky substance, but it maybe activates something that stitches together the proboscis. But this is its feeding tube, and it's basically 2 C shapes that connect together as a tube. And then once it's done pumping the hemolymph into its wings, it's going to be a beautifully formed butterfly. And gender in the butterfly is much easier to detect. The veins, and it's not even just the veins in its forewings, hind wings, it's all over. The veins are much thicker in the female, and the male has these scent glands. Whoops. So much easier to see at this stage. And again, we have the head, thorax, and abdomen. These are the forewings, and then 2 hind wings. And there are scent glands in the male. And there's also some controversy over whether or not those are utilized. And we'll get to that a little bit later. And antennae. The black veins of the wing form a strong framework, kind of like a kite. And the wing is made up of thousands of tiny flat scales that contain pigment. So when they get older, they start to lose their scales and lose their pigment. And the proboscis, fully stitched and drinking. I have cat hair on my mouth now. Typically coiled, the proboscis only unfurls when the butterfly takes in nectar or nutrients. Monarch butterflies exist solely to reproduce. Each spring through autumn, 4 generations of butterflies are produced. With the exception of the 4th generation butterflies, reproductive organs are developed as early as the pupa stage. Sexual maturity typically occurs within a week of eclose. And eggs develop in the abdomen of the female. The female emits pheromones that attract a male, and mating can last several hours. So there are some resources that say that the scent glands of the male are what attract the female, and there are others that say that the scent glands are not used in the monarch, and I tend to believe the latter report because it's a more reputable source. But if somebody knows otherwise, I'd love to hear it. Mating can last several hours, up to 16 hours. And once fertilization is complete, the female will seek out milkweed to lay the eggs. And you can see that she's got all of her legs on top of the milkweed, but her abdomen is curled underneath the leaf to lay the egg. The lifespan of early generation butterflies is approximately 2 to 6 weeks. And basically at the end of their life cycle, you can see like tattered and torn, probably some predator attacks or who knows, and she's losing some of her, this may be a male, some of its scales. 4th generation monarchs are super butterflies, basically, and have significant differences from earlier generations. The female reproductive system is in diapause. They do not initially reproduce. These butterflies have larger wings. This is my friend Robyn took a cell phone shot, and this is a 3rd generation compared to a 4th generation butterfly. Now, butterflies can vary in size between, just from butterfly to butterfly, but this was pretty dramatic difference. The 4th generation monarch lifespan is significantly longer, and they'll live throughout the winter. Eastern monarchs migrate 2,000 to 3,000 miles, sometimes some as far as 4,000 or more, to their overwintering site. Monarch eyes are shaped as half spheres, separated 180 degrees from each other. And they help the butterfly to detect the location of the sun in the sky. And their antennae are used to determine time of the day. So this information between their eyes and their antennae are what they use to navigate south, or just navigate. So I pulled this map from Monarch Watch, and it shows migration. So we're going to focus on autumn with this first slide, and then we're going to go through spring. So during the autumn, this is their big migration. The super monarchs fly from as far as north as Canada all the way down to this one forest area in central Mexico. Then the western monarchs are going to all gather down on the west coast here in California. And there is some monarchs are year-round, supposedly, in Florida, and I don't know. But 5th generation super monarchs migrate from summer to winter home in 1 generation. The eastern population primarily overwinters in this high altitude forest in Mexico. More research is still needed, though, to understand exactly how they know to go to this location. It's still not fully understood. Western monarchs typically overwinter in the coast of California. The monarch butterfly is the furthest migration of any insect. Monarchs are not able to travel in cold weather. I think it's like below 50 degrees. Before sunset, they'll gather on barrier islands and outer regions along the Atlantic coast. After sunrise, they'll wait for the sun to warm them up before continuing their journey south. And you can find them on the beaches, getting minerals from the sand and flying along the dune grasses. And we tried to see a migration cluster, but this was all we could see. So these were the most that we could find, but they overnight on evergreen trees on the coast. So you can see hundreds in one location, and I still haven't had the opportunity to see that up here in New York. And then their spring migration actually occurs in multiple generations. So the super butterflies, fourth generation monarchs, will then become reproductive, and they'll begin to mate and fly to Texas, where they'll begin to lay their eggs. And then the second generation, the first generation then is going to continue forward, continue north, and they're going to also lay eggs. So finally, after laying eggs, the super monarchs will die. And then the new season's first generations will continue north, and that'll continue happening until they reach their northernmost region. And then the cycle starts over. Conservation. Species numbers have dropped significantly since the mid-1980s. In the Western US, monarchs are in particular danger. That population declined by an estimated 99.9%, from as many as 10 million butterflies in the 80s to fewer than 2,000 in 2021. And earlier this year, the IUCN listed the monarch as endangered on the red list. It's actually endangered in other countries, maybe even more so. The species population fluctuates dramatically from year to year. So it has rebounded somewhat in the last year, but it can be so easily wiped out. So threats on the species: wintering habitat loss due to logging and deforestation. Imagine if that forest in Mexico wasn't there anymore, or had continued to reduce as it's doing now. Where are they going to overwinter? Or what if there's a massive storm system that blows through that area? They could be wiped out, an entire generation wiped out. So it's so volatile. Pesticide use has been a huge issue. Climate change and breeding habitat loss. So this is an illustration here. This is a site in Long Island, sorry, where they typically mow frequently throughout the summer. This is a milkweed site. And unfortunately, this summer, they mowed it, and then we were in a drought for several weeks. So this is weeks after they mowed, and it had barely grown back. You can see kind of tiny little sprigs trying. And in this spot, my friend Robyn and I went out seeking eggs, and we found them all over on these tiny little monarch plants. So that kind of illustrates to you just how desperate they are to find milkweed to lay their eggs. They're just going to anything they can find. But there's still time to restore the species, and the best ways that we can help are considering natural alternatives to chemical pesticides. Planting native milkweed. This is my friend Robyn. This is her backyard in Long Island, and she has common milkweed here and swamp milkweed here over on the right. Now she's noticed that her monarchs tend to prefer the swamp milkweed. The common milkweed, but if they're desperate, they'll eat the swamp milkweed. And milkweed produces, I didn't think this was a video. Milkweed has, right now it's growing seeds. So these are seed pouches, and they're gonna disperse. They're gonna break open and disperse. So you can just grab a seed pouch and plant in your own yard. I actually am very lucky to have Monarch naturally growing in my garden. I used to garden vegetables all the time, and I stopped growing vegetables, and the milkweed just started growing up. So now it's my milkweed garden. And it grows every year. So it's fortunately it's very reproductive. And plant native nectar flowers, because monarchs need nectar to survive, as monarch butterflies need nectar. And you can help raise monarchs. Due to recent studies, it's recommended to raise them in outdoor habitat. It's believed that affects their GPS migration capabilities. And you can volunteer with a monarch conservation organization, locate an organization near you, or if you're in the New York area and you want to help my friend Robyn, and we're going to talk about her in a minute, you can become a monarch mentor or actually go volunteer. And I think somebody, and I don't know if it's someone that's here tonight, I know one person actually did go out and help her, and Robyn was hugely relieved. I mean, hugely grateful. So we're going to talk about Robyn and her monarch conservation. So Robyn is owner and president of In-Home Pet Services in Long Island. She and her husband Paul are eco-travelers and avid birders. So if you're a birder, this will resonate with you. They have a life list of 1784. They travel a lot. And you can find them on Instagram here. Robyn maintains the Instagram site. Robyn is a biologist and a monarch butterfly conservation in Queens, New York. She rescues eggs from Moe sites, like I showed you a minute ago. And in 2021, released over 1,700 butterflies, tagging 200 of them. And I'll show you the tag a little bit later. In light of research published in 2019, what I mentioned earlier, which is she raises them all outdoors in outdoor habitat in her backyard to promote successful migration. So this is Robyn, and this is in 2020 when I went out to photograph her. This is her backyard habitat. And so we're just gonna go through a day in the life of my friend Robyn as she tends to monarchs. So as you can, this is the first thing in the morning. She checks the enclosures to get a count of the caterpillars and make sure that they have enough food. So you can see that they were hungry overnight. These are 4th gens. I'm sorry, yeah, not 4th gen. They're 5th instar. She wets milkweed that she's collected the day before and gives them fresh milkweed. She checks to see if there are any newly eclosed monarchs and puts them in a net container ready for release. And this is one thing that she deals with on a pretty regular basis, is monarchs attaching to less than convenient spots. So for example, these two are on the zipper of the net box, on the inside of the zipper. And this one attached his J to the bottom of a napkin or a paper towel, and I don't even know how he did that. And unfortunately, because of the tube container, they will often form their chrysalis underneath the plastic. So this is a newly formed chrysalis. So she waits for the chrysalis to hard, and she's going to wait until the next day before she deals with this, because they can't emerge safely. It's just not enough room. It's like that much room. So she's very, very carefully going to grab the silk mat with very narrow tweezers. You can see the tweezers a lot better here. She's very careful not to mess with the cremaster. Sticks a pin through a tiny pin through the silk, and then attaches it to a leaf and attaches it to the top of a net box. And now it can safely eclose when it's ready. This is a very common procedure she has to go through, and she's extremely cautious. Occasionally, butterflies will emerge and when there's a lot of storms in the area and she can't release them. So they're pretty hungry after they've been in a container overnight. So she'll make a nectar, and I'm not sure of the ratio, but I think it's with sugar and water. And she also has mango here, and she's just giving them an opportunity to feed if they need it. And then she's just releasing these from her backyard just because they're anxious to get going. They've been, housed for a day in her backyard. In the fourth generation species, she'll tag up to 200 of them. So this is you can see how tiny the tag is compared to the butterfly. And then she takes the net full of butterflies and she goes to a local park to release them, a park that has nectaring flowers. And she's always constantly keeping her Instagram followers apprised of what's happening, and because she wants to educate people and get people to be more conservation minded. Sometimes she has to help the monarch get out of the net, so very carefully puts her finger down and lets it climb up. You don't want to do anything to harm the butterfly. They're so fragile. And then releases them. After that, then she goes and gets fresh milkweed for the next day. And she also simultaneously is looking for new eggs to bring inside. And the reason, again, is because she never knows when they're going to mow, and she wants to give every egg a fighting chance of survival. And she has to go to busy intersections and median strips to find milkweed. Because look at behind the road, look at that mowed lawn. Like there could be milkweed up there, but there's not because they mow it too frequently. And they're going to mow every single site she goes to. And then here's one in a schoolyard. It's just a narrow strip that has milkweed. Again, mowed lawn. And here's just a cluster of eggs that she found one morning. And you can see they don't always, sometimes they miss and they end up getting it on a weed. So hopefully they'll find the milkweed after they've hatched. They have a good sense of, I guess, smell. And here she's just preparing them and putting them in containers for the next day. So they'll be safe until the next day. See over here on the right, you can see a container that has leaves in it. And then this is the monarch she's going to use to feed the next day's caterpillars when she gets up. So she's just cleaning it to make sure there aren't insects or any toxins on it from pesticides or anything. Although they don't spray in the location she goes to. And here's just her inside her enclosure, and here's the milkweed waiting for tomorrow. Often she'll find it's inevitable, given the numbers of eggs that she finds, there's going to be the occasional that's parasitized or diseased, and this one, I guess, is parasitized. And here's a diseased caterpillar. Every stage it can happen. This monarch, the wings have been damaged. I think it was damaged in the chrysalis. It didn't form its chrysalis properly. She's feeding it because she's hoping it'll be able to fly. But if they can't eat or they're, well, first, if they are diseased, she will move them into or potentially diseased, she'll move them into a separate container away from the others so that they don't spread any kind of disease. If necessary, she will euthanize. And the most humane way to do that is just to put them, she puts them in a pouch and then puts them in the freezer because they'll just slowly fall asleep and die. And at the end of the day, she likes paper. So she logs every single monarch, and she keeps statistics like gender, number of days in the pupa, number of days through the life cycle, et cetera. Everything she can think of, locations where she found the eggs. And these are just some of her tools of the trade. So whether you help out Robyn or the easiest way is just to plant milkweed or plant nectar flowers. It's up to us to bring them back. And I think it's something that we can do in our lifetime. Thank you. So are there questions? I didn't.
Wow, thanks, Teri. That was awesome. Those pictures, as usual, your pictures, photographs are amazing.
Thank you.
There are questions. Let's see. Travis asks, is there one mating or multiple?
That's a really good question. I would guess multiple because she could only fit so many eggs in her abdomen, so she would lay the eggs, but that's something that we'd have to follow up and confirm.
Okay. Dave Shepard asks, how does the fourth generation know it has to be a super butterfly and develop differently? What triggers that?
So I guess it's the change in the day length and the cooling of the air. Scientists are still learning more and more every day about this. But that's basically, it's just shorter days triggered certain hormones.
Rick Gallo mentions that he found a monarch in his yard with wings that were curled in one direction and it couldn't fly. And it came out of its chrysalis before it was ready.
Wondering if it came out too early?
Yeah, he said it was almost as if as though it had come out before it was ready.
Did you see the chrysalis? Because even though their cremaster is firmly attached, it's occasionally the silk maybe doesn't get attached perfectly and it may have fallen and had a flat edge or the chrysalis was somehow otherwise harmed.
Yeah, I did not see the chrysalis. It just happened to be in the grass next to the driveway, and I saw it struggling to try to fly, and its leaves seem to be both curled in the same direction.
Yeah, that would to me seem like a smashed pupa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. We put it in our butterfly cage and we fed it for a few days and it walked around and things, and then I put it into our we have a cut flower garden and I put it in there. So
yeah, I mean that's what Robyn did with that one that I showed in the picture, is that she just she wanted to keep that one as long as she knew it was okay, you know, still feeding. So
yeah.
But if
very
we get
sad.
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's going to happen, unfortunately. And maybe some predator took it and had it for a meal.
We feel fortunate that we actually got to release about 20 this season from milkweed plants that started as caterpillars, and so.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I did. What did I do? I only did like 4 this year, 2 at a time because I was traveling.
Okay, Colette asks, do monarchs only exist in the US, Canada, and Mexico?
There are there are like white monarchs in different countries, and I couldn't tell you because I didn't have time to research the other countries, but there are other countries that have monarchs. We have the only North American species, which makes sense, I suppose. And I don't know much about the other monarchs, what their migration is like, or if they're year-round. I do understand, though, that the population is severely dwindling throughout the world.
Okay, Laurel asks, she says, someone told me that raising monarchs indoors with artificial lights after sunset can mess up their ability to navigate and or migrate, an effect that persists as much as 7 generations. This is quite worrisome. I tried to find the research supporting this claim, but couldn't find a journal article. Have you heard this? And if so, can you point me to the study that demonstrated this?
Yeah, I can certainly find the links, but that is why Robyn raises her monarchs outside, and she doesn't use artificial light, except early in the morning when she's first checking the enclosure, I suppose, but she waits until sunrise before she fully gets going with tending to her monarchs. Because of the research that has indicated that it can affect because their migration is, their eyes are photosensitive, and it determines the location of the sun based on that. Well, hi, just got bit. my cat. This is Michelle down here. She wants to be the center of attention. But yes, they use their eyes to determine the position of the sun, and then their antennae determine time of day, and that's how they migrate. So I guess it's easy to understand if they were raised in an artificial lighting environment, that could be really problematic. So when I raise them outdoors as much as possible. If there's going to be severe storms, you can put them in a garage or something. Just don't use artificial light like you've suggested. And I will have to research the link, and I can send it to Christy.
Okay, thank you, Teri. Colette asks, what predators eat the chrysalis stage of the monarchs?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Is there a predator that eats the pupa? Does anybody here know? Because I don't. That's a really good question.
Anybody know?
I will look into that, because I'm curious now.
Okay, let's see. John Lowe says, awesome dynamic slides. Just to clarify, for east of the Rockies, there's just one generation that flies south in the autumn from north to Mexico. But on the return trip, there are multiple generations to get back north.
Yes, that's correct. I tried to make that clear, but I didn't have a separate slide for southern versus northern migration. But yes, the 4th generation monarch is the super butterfly that travels several thousand miles down to Texas, or I'm sorry, down to central Mexico. Then that 4th generation becomes reproductive and travels as far as Texas, and it's laying its eggs along the way, and then it dies. And then the next generation picks up where it left off. So it's a multiple generational trip north and a single generation south. And thank you.
Okay, Colette has another question. Colette, do you want to unmute yourself and ask this question? I'm not quite certain.
Okay, let's see. What did I put?
About the parts that are left behind during the
Yeah, so I noticed that like during the life stages of the monarch, there is stuff that's left behind and that goes into the next stage. So what happens to all the quote unquote stuff? Like there's little, I didn't write it down. Your photographs were so amazing. I stopped writing notes because I didn't
thank you.
So I don't have the correct vocabulary to explain it.
Yeah, there is for example, in the pupa, when after an eclose, if you look down at the bottom, and I didn't cover this, and I don't have a picture of this, it's kind of a reddish, it's just a little bit too. It's like this reddish liquid that comes out of the pupa. So that's it. That's what it leaves behind. Everything else it reforms. It's truly remarkable.
It is. Super fabulous presentation, by the way. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Mhm.
I wish I could have. I want to go back, and there's just some photos that I wish I'd gotten and I didn't. And the tagging photo wasn't mine. It was Robyn's husband took that photo, but everything else is mine, except where indicated.
Teri, I have a quick question. The Robyn's Instagram, I was trying to look it up, but I didn't write it down. Can you?
Yes.
See what that is?
A couple without, actually, let's go back to that slide.
Okay, I was gonna put it in the chat box.
Here we go. A couple without borders, and Robyn's the one that maintains the Instagram. So, and she is very responsive. She's just superhuman in my opinion, because she just is constantly doing a million things.
Okay. Oh, let's see. Travis had a question. Travis, yeah. Oh, any idea of aphid infestation on milkweed? Can it create challenges for monarchs or their caterpillars?
So I didn't pull up a photo of that, but I don't know if I have one really handy, but as a lot of the sites have they're orange aphids, and I don't know what they're technically called. But you see infestations all over the milkweed. It doesn't harm the caterpillars. However, it makes the milkweed kind of disgusting. So you don't. Did I answer it? What was the follow-on to that?
Just if the aphid infestation could cause challenges for monarchs or their caterpillars. I think you answered.
Yes. So when I went out, I helped her for 2 days this past summer. I would have liked to get out there more, but it's 4 hours away. And one of the sites that we went to, the milkweed was just gross, and aphids were just all over it. And yet, if a monarch needed to lay an egg, it would find the freshest leaf and lay it there. But so it can kind of consume it can take over the milkweed. So that could affect it. Yes. They're not a direct threat to the monarchs, I guess.
Okay. How far does each generation travel during the spring migration?
That's a good question. And maybe the guy that spoke up earlier knows this. I would say like 1,000 miles, but if you know exactly, please chime in.
Okay. Any other questions?